Hello and welcome back to our second semi-final of the Pokemon 2022 Bilbao Special Event. My name is Jamie Boyd. I'm joined once again by Luke Romy, and we will be finding out who is going to be joining Jonas Wiegel in the final.
Yeah, I always love being able to have that story mode that we've got now at the minute. You can really follow players through. We've got our one finalist, and now we have got a Spanish showdown with two players representing Spain, battling it out to get into that grand final.
Yeah, and we can just have a quick look at who we are going to be featuring here. Of course, Jonas was able to advance into the final there, and now we're going to be featuring our second bracket. So we are going to be featuring Antonio Sánchez versus Juan Benítez, and it's going to be a very, very good game. We've got a Zacian Kyogre against a Zacian Kyogre here.
Yes, that combination of Zacian Kyogre, as I've mentioned, has been extremely dominant here in Bilbao. But there's a slight variation in the remaining four Pokemon. For Juan, we've got some really interesting choices with the Indeedee on there as well for that redirection and the Psychic Terrain being disruptive for any prankster modes that can come out from the opposing side of the field. And with Antonio, we've been able to showcase this team earlier in top 8, but I have still not yet seen that little Torkoal.
No, we haven't, and it could be entirely viable as a counter to the opposing Kyogre. You can opt into whichever weather you want when you've got the Kyogre and the Torkoal. You can be running the rain mode, you can switch it up for that sun mode. That would help the Venusaur be able to counter the opposing Kyogre, so it's definitely not an unviable pick for the Torkoal to come to this match. We'll see if both players are going to be opting in for that weather war, but please show your support for both of our players. Choose Antonio in the chats if you are supporting Antonio here, and Juan if that is the person you are supporting.
Exactly, and particularly when we have a Spanish event as well, there is a lot of support here in the crowd, lots of players wanting to see which of our Spanish players is going to make it into the final against our German representative, Jonas. So it's going to be very exciting to see how this match is going to play out. And you can see Antonio at the minute getting the favourite points.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's great to see that we are guaranteed to have a Spaniard in the final of this Spanish special event. So that is going to be good to see, and see if they can take down the German invaders. So yeah, lots of support for both of these players, but it seems like Antonio's just picking out there.
Yes, and it's going to be interesting seeing, like you mentioned as well, this battle between the Zacian and the Kyogre, and we've spoken about it a lot over the weekend, about speed control and making sure you have that advantage to hit your opponent first before they're able to get the KO on yourself. And I think this match is going to be just like all the others. It's going to be really critical to make sure that you're picking up the KOs before your opponent can.
Yeah, absolutely. And the positioning is going to be very crucial as well. Depending on if the Torkoal is going to come to the match, if it's just going to be Kyogre versus Kyogre, you probably want to be getting your speed control going so that you can be outspeeding both the opponent's Pokemon. But we can have a quick look at the achievements of both these players again. We'll start off with Antonio. We mentioned before when he was on stream previously about the fact that he was so consistent in the online tournaments, and now he's made it into at least the top 4, looking to make it into his very first in-person live event final.
Exactly, and it was lovely talking to him earlier about how he's been able to kind of take those skills and transfer them to this kind of event, and it is so different with the different energy and adrenaline that it demands in these events. So very impressive he's been able to keep that composure. Moving on to Juan's side, as you can see at the minute, we haven't got achievements for him to add to his kind of trophy cabinet in a way, but after today, he cannot say that anymore. He's already at top 4 at the Bilbao Special Event, and really all we have to determine is what number it's going to be, top 4, final, or first.
Yeah, it's always nice to see a breakout performance by multiple players. We had a few players that we featured on the stream previously, all the way through the Swiss as well, without any achievements to show, but now they do have them behind their belts, and this is definitely going to be one for coming out for here for Juan.
I love that. It's making history at the end of the day, and having all these people coming together, playing Pokemon, and being able to celebrate the game that they love. I absolutely love to see it. And I also love that this is our second top 4 match. We're going to find out who is going to be our second finalist. The competition has been whittled down to just, at this point, 3 remaining trainers, and soon it will be only 2. Yeah,
and so we'll have to see if it's going to be Antonio or Juan. So it's definitely different team compositions coming out from both players, even though they've opted in for the Zacian and the Kyogre. They do share the Venusaur. It's interesting to see the Venusaur paired up with the Kyogre. You would expect it normally to just be with the Sun. It is, of course, paired with that Torkoal, but you probably have Sunny Day on the Whimsicott, at least for coming out for one side of the field, paired up with that Charizard as well. It has been very interesting to see how well synergistically the Kyogre and the Venusaur work, even though it's usually classically paired up with the Groudon instead. Because we can see that the leads are being sent out, and there we go. We've got the Venusaur paired up with the Kyogre immediately coming out before Antonio's out of the field, but Juan is going to be going with the Indeedee and the Kyogre.
Yeah, we're going underwater here. 2 Kyogres on the field. Indeed, you're going to set that Psychic Terrain, though, and be able to use Redirection to draw in any attacks at this point. Venusaur coming out, don't usually get to see this in the rain, but Venusaur still is formidably threatening at this point. The Psychic Seed revealed as the item choice on that opposing Indeedee, so not running anything like a safety goggles or anything that could maybe redirect in any sleep powders, so both the Pokemon from hand side exposed to that move choice from the Venusaur. As well, Kyogre doesn't want to take any Grass-type moves from Venusaur either.
Yeah, you're going to want to keep that safe. You could just go on the offensive, going for the Expanding Force, but that does, of course, risk the grass move going into that Kyogre. And that's the main thing that the Venusaur wants to do. It wants to go for the Sleep Powders to put things to sleep. It wants to go for the G-Max Fine Lash to be able to get that residual damage going. So do you opt to try and get that damage into the opposing Venusaur? We're going to see a Dynamax coming out for that. Seemed to be one side. So most likely going to be the Kyogre for the Dynamax. If the Venusaur does opt to Dynamax itself and go for the G-Max Fine Lash, then the Kyogre would be able to take it a lot better. So that would allow the opportunity for the Indeedee to go on the offensive. It doesn't need to follow me as such this turn to be able to keep it safe from the Vine Lash. It does have to be worried about potential Sleep Powder though.
That's very true. Venusaur has lots of options. One of those options could also be to Dynamax potentially, but at the end of the day, Antonio has two great Dynamax options at this point, whether you want to go for something like the G-Max Fine Lash and put the pressure onto the Kyogre, which is the option he's gone for, or whether you could utilize the Kyogre as well and just start dealing with that Indeedee and get rid of it and gain that kind of momentum. But I like this play by Antonio, just making sure that the Venusaur has the capabilities to maybe survive, obviously, the Expanding Force or even something like a Max Hailstorm coming out from the opposing Kyogre. Indeedee, however, just going for the follow me, drawing in the attacks. Kyogre's gone for the Max Lightning on Juan's side. So actually, let's ignore the Venusaur. Let's focus on this Kyogre, because that's going to be a pest to deal with if I've got my Charizard in the back potentially. Doing huge damage, overwriting the terrain as well, so getting the Electric Train on the field as well. Nothing now can go to sleep if that Venusaur was going for any sleep powders. But, the Indeedee avoids. Kyogre going to be happy to take the Origin Pulse here. Really, Indeedee was the target that was needed to be dealt with at this point. And the Vine Lash is going to go down into that imposing Indeedee. Takes it really well, though.
Yeah, it's a very interesting choice of going for the Max Lightning, but you can see why it would go for that. It puts a stop to any of the Sleep Powders that can come out. So if you're going for the Follow Me with the Indeedee and get that Max Lightning off, then nothing is going to be going to sleep. So the Venusaur forced to go for the Dynamax here. That Orange Pulse, a bit unfortunate that it did miss the Indeedee, given the chip damage that it did take previously. That would have almost certainly been able to pick up the knockout there. So unfortunate dodge coming out for Antonio. But at least that doesn't give a switch into any other Pokemon in the back, whether that would have been the Zacian. The Zacian switching in on this turn would have been able to go for the Behemoth Blade into the Venusaur, and you'd have been forced to switch out into the Torkoal to be able to do that. If you have even brought the Torkoal to this match, we've yet to see that. So the Indeedee staying on the field may not be the worst thing, because it's not exerting the most offensive pressure, especially because the Max Lightning overwrote its own Psychic Terrain, so Expanding Force wouldn't be doing too much damage. It's forced to just go for Follow Me here.
Yeah, it's just going for that Follow Me, drawing in the attacks once again as Kyogre goes for a Max Geyser. Weather's still in effect though, that rain is on the field, so it's able to utilize that. Go into the Kyogre, even though Kyogre normally can take a Max Geyser reasonably well with a critical hit as well and the low HP from the Max Lightning previously. Going to be able to remove that restricted from Antonio. Venusaur going to be able to go for the G-Max Vine Lash, however, connecting onto that Indeedee once again. It is enough to pick up the KO this time, thanks to the residual damage as well. But that Kyogre on Juan's side sitting really healthy, as is, to be fair, the Venusaur. You know, both these Dynamax Pokemon haven't really had too much threatening them at the point. They've just been able to deal out the damage. Yeah,
the Indeedee's been keeping the Kyogre safe from all those Vine Lashes, but now that has dropped, it would be the target potentially of that G-Max Vine Lash. We'll have to see what's waiting in the back for these plays. If it is the Torkoal for Antonio, they do have the opportunity to bring the N, overwrite the Rain, and get that Venusaur faster than the Kyogre now, because we have seen that the Kyogre has been outspeeding the Venusaur when it is just in that drizzle instead, so you would need that Sun to be able to do that. And now you've lost your Kyogre. If you opt for the Torkoal as the switch in, then you are overwriting that drizzle for the rest of that game at that point, unless there's a Max Geyser coming out for the Kyogre. But it is just going to be Incineroar switching in, and that's always the Pokemon you want to be switching in, as Zacian is also joining the field. You always get to get that Intimidate down onto the opposing Zacian, bring it back down to the neutral, cancel out that Intrepid Sword, and get that Fake Out pressure into the Zacian as well. But the fact that that wasn't the Torkoal means that we've still got the Rain on the field, so this Incineroar is going to be heavily threatened by a Max Geyser that could still come out from the Kyogre, and you are forced to go for a Fake Out into the Zacian if you want to put a stop to the Behemoth Blade going into the Venusaur, which would do absolutely massive damage. But if you do that, the Incineroar is completely open to the Max Geyser, so do you maybe switch out into your Pokemon in the back just to try and avoid taking that Max Geyser on the Incineroar so you can get an Intimidate on the Zacian in the future, or are you going to just sacrifice it to keep your Venusaur safe for that one extra turn to try and get another Vine Lash into the Kyogre?
That's the thing, it's all about supporting the Venusaur at this point, because Venusaur has so much utility in the move pool that it has access to. It has a lot of options for the Pokemon on Juan's side of the field. I would be doubtful that Torkoal's even in the back at this point, knowing that it's the Incineroar. Very likely going to be the Zacian as the fourth pick there. Fake Out does indeed go into the Zacian as Kyogre goes for the Max Geyser. So for the sake of being able to stop the Zacian move this turn and this turn only, Incineroar is going to be hit with a one-hit KO from the Max Geyser. So Antonio down to just 2 Pokemon now will be forced to reveal what that 4th Pokemon is. And Venusaur going for the Max Quake. So you do have the trade-off here where you've been able to sacrifice your Incineroar to allow the Venusaur the opportunity to deal some damage to the opposing Zacian. But it's not enough to be able to get a KO. You don't get that solid Pokemon for Pokemon trade-off here at this point.
No, you don't. And the Vine Lash is not going to be enough to pick up the Zacian. It will do the next turn, so if Antonio's able to survive for one more turn, the Zacian will drop to that Vine Lash. And they almost certainly have their own Zacian waiting in the back. They could still have the Torkoal, we've yet to see, but both would be reasonably impactful here. If it is going to be the Zacian, as we do see come in for Antonio's side of the field, it's going to be interesting to see the speed of interactions between both Zacians. If the Zacian on Antonio's side of the field moves first, you get to Behemoth Blade and KO the opposing Zacian before any damage from their Behemoth Blade would be dealt to you. And then you get to go for your Leaf Storm into the opposing Kyogre, which is probably going to be in range at this point, given that it's taken a little bit of chip while it was in the Dynamax as well. That should now be in range of that Leaf Storm. So speed interactions of both the Zacians will be pretty critical here. Whether the Zacian on one side of the field is able to get that Behemoth Blade into the Venusaur first, because the Pokemon that could be still waiting in the back for one, we haven't seen the 4th Pokemon. If it is going to be someone like the Whimsicott to try and get speed control, they won't be able to do that until it hits the field and then clicks the Tailwind button. So you've got to see what the speed interactions are going to be between both of these Zacians, because there's no speed control. It's just going to come down to how they're trained.
Yeah, and the Whimsicott, you want to make sure when it goes for that Tailwind that it's got Pokemon to help boost up. Otherwise, it's just on its own, kind of flailing about in the wind. On Juan's side as well, you could have the Venusaur or the Charizard here to maybe try and kind of have, particularly with the Venusaur, to have an answer to the opposing Kyogre in this situation. But it is yet to be revealed. Juan going for the Protect on the Kyogre as Zacian goes for the Behemoth Blade. So Antonio Zacian is the one moving first, and its target choice has been, of course, the opposing Zacian that's going to be able to pick up the KO against it, leaving Juan with just 2 Pokemon remaining. And I think critically, getting the speedier Zacian, picking up the KO against it, freed up the Venusaur so it didn't have to worry about taking any unnecessary damage. You could see it was going for the Frenzy Plant, trying to really deal with this Kyogre and remove the second restricted from the field.
Yeah, you get that extra bit of damage that you would have done otherwise if you had Leaf Storm with the Venusaur. The downside, of course, is going to be that it has to recharge, but there is the Whimsicott, so it does have the opportunity to put the Kyogre faster than the Zacian as well. The only issue is that the Zacian hasn't taken any damage, as well as the Venusaur. It made it through the entirety of the Gigantamax without taking any damage. So even if you do click Tailwind and click Origin Pulse to do some big damage, it's probably not enough into the Zacian. It's definitely not enough into the Venusaur. So then you have to contend with the Frenzy Plant that can come out into the opposing Kyogre, and the Whimsicott is not going to be able to do enough damage to KO either of these Pokemon. So you do have to rely on the Kyogre to break through the rest of this game. You do need to be getting your Kyogre faster as well, but it's just going to be failing a double protector as the Whimsicott tries to get the Tailwind.
Yeah, Whimsicott just getting that Tailwind up, boosting up the speed of Juan's Kyogre here. Venusaur able to go for the Frenzy Plant, though, into the opposing Kyogre and pick up the KO against it, leaving just little Whimsicott here.
Yeah, no, it's not going to be able to do it, unfortunately, against the Venusaur or the Zacian as well. You just get to click Behemoth Blade and pick up the KO. The Venusaur wouldn't be able to move this turn, but that doesn't matter. Zacian's plenty strong enough to deal with just a Whimsicott. So very, very nicely played from Antonio coming out here. Not opting for any of the Sun, but Venusaur just doing its thing. And didn't take any damage in that game at all as well. It just came onto the field in that turn 1, went for the Gigantamax, went for the Max Vine Lash, as it loves to do, and just was completely uncontested. It wasn't damaged at all. The Kyogre had opportunities to go for the Max Hailstorm into it, instead prioritizing the opposing Kyogre. So maybe there needs to be a bit more focus on that Venusaur this time, because lots of Vine Lashes, lots of adding up of the residual damage, and then just a Frenzy Plant to just KO the Kyogre, leaving just a Whimsicott in the end. So maybe does need to prioritize that Venusaur a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, we always see Venusaur in sun usually. I'm not used to seeing it in a little bit of a downpour, but it certainly was able to pull its own weight in that particular match. And I think even though you don't necessarily have the speed pressure, you have the type advantage against the Kyogre, and you can apply that so formidably. And you could see as well from Juan's side, Juan was cautious and wary that the sleep powders could be coming his way as well. And being able to set up that electric terrain just negated that from being a threat, gave him a little bit more breathing room, but almost at the same time, because that was not the strategy that Antonio had gone for, Antonio could capitalize on the fact that he had gone on the offensive and just start dealing out huge damage.
Yeah, absolutely. So you need something to be able to threaten it, and there is the Charizard that would be very, very effective against the opposing Venusaur. And the fact that the Torkoal wasn't brought meant that if you're bringing the Charizard, you're not going to most likely get into that sunny environment. Maybe if you have the Whimsicott carrying that sunny day, that would be a way of doing it. But the awkward thing about trying to do the most amount of damage to the Venusaur would be the Charizard in the sun. but then the Venusaur would also be in the sun and outspeed that Charizard. So the fact that there isn't a manual weather setter, sorry, there is a manual weather setter in the Whimsicott, there's not a drought setter on the field, so you can't just give the sun boost to the Charizard. The Whimsicott has to Tailwinds to put the Charizard faster, and then also Sunny Day to be able to get it to do the massive damage, and you can't do both on the same turn, so it's going to be a little bit awkward there. So if you are opting not for the Charizard and going for the Kyogre, you need to start doing some Hailstorms to the Venusaur. That would be the best way of breaking through, given the Pokemon brought. Zacian, if it gets into position to be able to Behemoth Blade, would be very effective as well, but it wasn't afforded that opportunity. When it hit the field to be able to Behemoth Blade, it just took the Fake Out and the Quake, and then was in range of the opposing Zacian. And the fact that Antonio's was the one that was moving first was very critical here. If Juan's was the one that was moving first, it would have got the Behemoth Blade into the Venusaur. That could have been a different game.
I mean, the way you describe it, it sounds like an awful amount of weight on little Whimsicott's shoulders. I'm not sure if he even has shoulders, but it sounds like it's a lot of pressure on it to perform in this match. It's got so many different things that it has the capability to do and might need to do in order to help Juan push this to a Game 3 to try and get into that final.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have to see if there is going to be an adjustment at all. Whether that's something like the Charizard is going to be joining the game. Yes, we are going to be seeing that. There is the Whimsicott and the Charizard coming out for one side of the field. Going to be much more threatening into what could have been a Venusaur, but there is no Venusaur to be seen just yet. That is going to be Tornadus and Zacian coming out for Antonio.
Yeah, hey there, Charizard. Welcome to the semi-finals. Paired up next are Whimsicott. Like you said, Jamie, there's a lot of utility that Whimsicott can do. It can go for something like a Tailwind, it can go for something like a Sunny Day, and just really help out the positioning of that Charizard, which again is in a position to threaten down that opposing Zacian. It could go for something like the Gmax Wildfire, start setting up that residual damage and deal a significant chunk to the Zacian in return. On the other side, though, Antonio has the utility to deal with the Charizard and negate the offensive pressure it has. You could switch in your Kyogre, get the Rain set up, you could switch in Incineroar, which isn't going to mind taking a fire move at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if that Kyogre was going to switch in here, but then you have your two Prankster Pokemon, both that have utility to alter the weather. Could we see a little bit of mind games going on here?
Yeah, we definitely could. It will depend on if there's any switching, which it doesn't seem like there is in this turn, and there is going to be a Dynamax coming out. I believe Antonio's side of the field. That might be the Tornadus going for the Dynamax here. A little bit unconventional, especially because you classically want to match the Tailwind of the opposing Whimsicotts that we would be expecting to see come out here. Could very much be a Sunny Day coming out from Whimsicotts, because maybe you're expecting to stall out a turn of Tailwind, allow them to move first, because Zacian would have moved first before Charizard regardless. There's not even a Dynamax coming out from the Charizard here. It's just been protecting itself.
Yeah, going straight on the defensive. Protect coming out from Charizard as Whimsicott does go for that Tailwind. So regardless of what happens to Whimsicott this turn, it has set this up for Juan's other Pokemon. Zacian going for the Behemoth Blade to no avail into the Protect of the Charizard, and this Tornadus is going for the max airstream, so connecting down through the Protect onto the Charizard, doing about a fifth of the damage there, and getting the +1 speed up on the Zacian and on the Tornadus. But with the Tailwind opposing it, it's going to have to get another one of those in order to actually gain any momentum, and we kind of go into the second turn in a very similar position to how we were in the previous one, where the Charizard is still in a great position to go for something like a Dynamax. It's now also faster, and Whimsicott has the utility to maybe go for something like a Sunny Day if it is, of course, running that.
Yeah, we were saying that you need the two-turn setup to be able to go for the sun, having the sun active on the field and also in the Tailwind environment. That's one turn of the setup done. You've got the Tailwind, so you should most likely be faster with this Charizard. You can now go for the Dynamax now. You did take a reasonable amount of chip damage through that Protect, but you are still pretty healthy with the Charizard. Most likely still going to be out of range of a Behemoth Blade from the Zacian. It'll be pretty close at this point, but the fact that you should be moving first should allow you to get that Gmax Wildfire into the opposing Zacian, and you are guaranteeing that you are doing so if you have Cotton Spore as well.
Yeah, Whimsicott being like, it's not time for sun, not quite yet, we're just going to keep working on the speed, throwing that Cotton Spore down to make sure Charizard is most certainly, dominantly going first with the Gmax Wildfire, completely wipes the Zacian from the battle here. Super effective damage, getting that residual chip as well. That's going to affect some of Antonio's Pokemon going forward in this match. Tornadus, however, still able to be moving this particular match, going for that max airstream again into the Charizard. Actually does a huge chunk of damage, taking it down to only about 30 HP remaining, and critically I think evening the score on the Tailwind side of things, and that's why that little Whimsicott with the Cotton Spore, really great play there into that Tornadus. Yeah,
you would have overtaken the Charizard with the speed, so if it was just two max airstreams matching the Tailwinds, but matching Tailwind and the Cotton Spore still gives the advantage to the Charizard. So whatever you switch in here is still going to have to contend with the Wildfire and the airstreams that can come out from the Charizard. If you switch in the Kyogre, then the Gmax Wildfire into the Tornadus wouldn't be doing as much damage, but you can still go for an airstream plenty well enough as well. If if you bring in the Incineroar, it's probably still out of range of Fake Out at this point, which would have been the only real priority that would be coming out. So Charizard really gets to do whatever it wants in this next turn as well. So a very smart stalling out that first turn, not going on the offensive. It was doubled up by the Tornadus and the Zacian. That would have been a KO into that Charizard if both of those moves would have connected into the Dynamax form. But the Incineroar coming in, it can take the max moves from the Charizard quite well, but it's still not going to be exerting too much offensive pressure. It's probably going to be in range of a Throat Chop or a Darkest Lariat into the Charizard, but the Tornadus, the fact that it's still under speeds when it would have normally been outspeeding is going to be a bit awkward for it here, because now the Whimsicott has set up the Sunny Day, the Cotton Sport and the Tailwind. You can quit into the get the Sunny Day going if you do have the Whimsicott carrying that move choice as well. We've seen that it's got the Cotton Sport and the Tailwind. It may not have the Sunny Day. It still has room for one more of its pranks shenanigans if it does carry that, so we'll have to see if that is going to be one of the options. But the fact that the Incineroar has come in means that it can just go for the Fake Out into the Whimsicott and put a stop to that if that is the move of choice that it does have. And that means that the Charizard at least will be able to move first, but it shouldn't be able to pick up a KO here.
Yeah, Whimsicott just going to retreat, actually, in place of the Zacian. That's able to come in unintimidated, considering Antonio's Incineroar is already out there on the field. And Trapezoid Boost going to get its attack stat up to +1 here in this second game. Incineroar going for the Fake Out into that slot as well. Zacian very happy to take that in this position. And Charizard's able to go for the Max Airstream. So once again, speed control really being on the mind of Juan here, wanting to make sure that left, right, and center there are options in order to really be the best and speediest thing, possibly not even of the game, but of the tournament at this point. You know, just making sure that you've got every advantage you can have. Tornadus is going to go for the Max Flare, though, capitalizing on, into the Zacian, and almost picks up the KO. Almost.
Yeah, not quite enough. A very well-trained Zacian coming out there. And that was not the Sunsetter that I had in mind.
Me neither.
Now that we have the Sun on the field, that Charizard is going to be very strong. It made it through this turn completely unscathed, and it's going to be having another turn of Dynamax here. So, yeah, the very, very nice catch of the Zacian on the switch in. If it would have KO'd, that would have been very beneficial, but it was able to survive. It's got an Airstream boost now, so it's going to be outspeeding all of the Pokemon on the opposing side of the field. With the Tailwind as well, it's going to be super speedy. And the Charizard made it through. That means it gets a Sun-boosted max move into the opposing team. Both Pokemon should be able to be picked up by both of the Pokemon. If the Zacian goes for Behemoth Blade and Tornadus, that should be enough to KO. And the Incineroar is definitely going to be in range of Airstream at this point. So at least you made it through the Dynamax with your Tornadus unscathed, and now you are back to your Prankster form, so you can go for a Tailwind to get that Tailwind going for the future, which it does seem to be going for here. So you would assume the Kyogre is waiting in the back for Antonio. You need to be getting that speed control to match the opponents.
Exactly, and Zacian going to go for the Behemoth Blade here from Zacian on one side of the field, connecting down onto the opposing Tornadus, but of course not before it was able to get up that crucial Tailwind. And with the KO, it now paves the way for Antonio to bring in that Pokemon from the back, most likely that Kyogre, and start changing the weather up and applying some pressure. Charizard, however, is like, I see what you're doing with the speed control. Remember, I got this. I've been doing this from the beginning. Going for another Max Airstream with a critical hit as well, just to remove the Incineroar threat from the field as well. So leaving Antonio with really just the Kyogre remaining. And with all the boosts that have been happening, it's very, very difficult to say at this stage where things are, particularly with the Tailwind on Juan's side, I believe, expired.
Yeah, but you've still got the Whimsicott waiting in the back. You do switch it out for the Zacian, so even if the Tailwind does run out, like we do see here, you can just bring in the Whimsicott and match it once again. And so I think the Zacian even has 2 Airstream boosts as well, so it doesn't even matter about matching the Tailwinds. The Kyogre's going to come in for Antonio's side of the field, but with a +2 from the 2 Airstreams that the Zacian got, it doesn't even need to go for a Tailwind at this point. You would need to go for Tailwind if Whimsicott wants to outspeed the Kyogre, but Zacian's plenty fast enough at this point anyway, so it's going to be quite awkward for this Kyogre now, because the Zacian is going to be in range of any of the moves that Antonio would want to go for, but it's still going to be able to get off at least one more final move, and that's going to be a very strong move. The Tailwind will allow your Pokemon waiting in the back as well to outspeed the opposing Kyogre when it comes in.
Yeah, and Zacian being able to go for this incredibly speedy Behemoth Blade down into the opposing Kyogre. Obviously, we don't have Dynamax in play at the moment, and it's able to do not quite 50%, so it might need the little Whimsicott to go for a cheeky Moonblast or something just to chip it over the edge. Kyogre is going to go for the Origin Pulse, connects on both the opposing Pokemon here. Going to be able to pick up the KO easily against the Zacian, but Whimsicott able to hang on, having a good type advantage here against the Water-type move. And it leaves Juan now able to bring in the last remaining Pokemon for the back. Residual damage as well, helping just push Kyogre a little bit closer to the 0 HP part of the barometer. And then you also have now the option of your hand to bring in that Kyogre. We saw that it had access to Thunder, or an electric type move. the rain is up. If it is thunder, it's going to connect.
Yeah, so it's going to be incredibly difficult for this low HP Kyogre on Antonio's side to come back. The Whimsicott does have access to Energy Ball, so we at least get to see what its offensive move is going to be. It could have been Energy Ball or Moonblast. Those are the main two options. Maybe it doesn't beam here or there, but it's good to confirm that it does have Energy Ball, so it is a little bit more effective against the opposing Kyogre. So that is going to equal the score here, and we are going into our Game 3.
Yeah, Game 3, there's now one game standing between both these players in order to try and advance into that grand final to face down against Jonas. Now, I mean, that game was so different to the first one. Juan really just took the dominant stance of, I'm going to have speed control every single way. We've been talking about it all weekend, Jamie, and now it's kind of been a masterclass in that game too, about all the different options, different ways to utilize gaining a speed advantage in a match.
Yeah, there was all three of the main ones you would see. Although Tailwind and Airstream are the very common ones. Cotton Spore is not as common, but still, yes, absolutely unique and very effective as well. It's if you have the Whimsicott on the Tornadus, you can match Tailwinds, and then you're still at neutral. It effectively cancels it's out. But then if you have Tailwind and Cotton Spore, that brings the advantage back on your side of the field. Tornadus would have access to something like Icy Winds, but Cotton Spore wins over Icy Wind in terms of the speed control. So, and then we got the Max Airstreams to just boost yourself even faster. So, yeah, and very importantly, showing how crucial the speed control was in that match. It was very interesting to see the Venusaur left on the bench for Antonio, given how effective it was in that game one. Maybe expecting that the adjustment would be something like the Charizard, which was incredibly dominant in that game too. So we've seen both of the Kanto starters coming into this match being incredibly dominant in game 1 for Venusaur and game 2 for Charizard. So do you try and go for the Charizard mode again, while maybe Antonio commits a bit more to the Kyogre, going for the Max Geysers maybe into the Charizards to try and counter it? Because Tornadus going for the Dynamax meant that you couldn't Tailwind for 3 turns. You can Max Airstream, but the Tailwind was already set.
They're already on the back foot at that point.
Exactly, and you were trying to match a Tailwind and a Cotton Spore with just Max Airstream, and you're not going to win that Speed War. So the Tornadus maybe not the ideal max option there. I can see what was going for there, because if you don't have the Kyogre on the field, you want to be maybe doubling up into the Charizard and protecting, but if it did Dynamax, Behemoth Blade and Hurricane would have been risky, but Hurricane, Behemoth Blade and Max Airstream is guaranteed damage and would have KO'd the Charizard. So a very smart protect coming out from that Charizard in that second game, keeping it safe, and then going for the Dynamax on that second turn.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You needed the Charizard to be fit and healthy to go for that Gigantamax. And I think as well, the benefit of Tailwind versus Max Airstream or Cotton Spore is it stays on the field regardless of your Pokemon get KO'd. It's just there in your kind of atmosphere. Whereas if you have the boosts from Max Airstream, once you're KO'd, it's gone. Or if a Pokemon switches in, they don't get to reap those benefits. Whereas if Tailwind's in play, yes, it can expire, but you get to have the benefits more solidly for those couple of turns.
You have to switch out and switch back in to cancel the Cotton Spore, and that's still losing effectively to maybe 1 or 2 turns. So there are positives and negatives to Tailwind and Cotton Spore, but having both gives you both of the options. So we're going to see Juan go with exactly the same thing here. We are going to see the Charizard on the Whimsicott, and we're going to go back to what worked for Antonio in that game 1 with the Venusaur and the Kyogre.
Yeah, I mean, both players have gone for what won them their respective games in this top 4 set. And again, it's a very interesting situation here where you've got Kyogre bringing the weather onto the field, having that rain element, that kind of extra pressure. Whimsicott, of course, has the speed pressure as well with something like the Tailwind. And Charizard can do a lot of damage to the opposing Venusaur with something like a Max Airstream, but this Kyogre is certainly applying a lot of pressure at this point. It can go for so much damage into that opposing Charizard.
Yeah, it definitely can. You don't need to worry too much about the GMAX Wildfires, but yeah, like you said, Airstream is still going to be super effective against that Venusaur and will still do massive damage. But if you do go for something like an Airstream into the Venusaur, that means that you are not targeting down this Kyogre, and that's a full HP Wolf Spout coming your way. Maybe an Energy Ball could be launched off into the Kyogre, because you don't particularly need to Tailwind this turn, or even go for Cotton Spore this turn, because you are outspeeding with the Charizard. So it can just go on the offensive here. It can Dynamax. We'll have to see if the Whimsicott is going to go opt for any of those speed control modes. If it sets Tailwind, that's going to be useful in the future, but it doesn't particularly need to this turn. It can actually just go on the offensive, get some chip with the Energy Ball, maybe break a Focus Sash on the Venusaur if it is carrying that, but Charizard is not actually going on the offensive. It's just going for Max Guard.
I like this. It's a very similar play to what Juan did in Game 2, but actually going for the Max Guard instead of just Protect. Stops a potential Max Geyser or anything like that breaking through and dealing damage even through that Protect. Origin Pulse coming out, able to connect onto the opposing Whimsicott, does a significant chunk of damage to it, really weakening it and making it quite precarious at this stage. As Venusaur follows up with the Weather Ball, however, using that rain to just further do damage into that opposing Whimsicott. It's not, oh, it is enough just to pick up the KO against it. So no more Whimsicott, no more disruption. Yes, it's able to get the Tailwind off at this point, but that will expire in 3 turns.
Yeah, and if there's a Tornadus waiting in the back, that can be matched. And usually you want to be trying to stall out the turns of Tailwinds that you go for. You want your opponent to be going for Tailwind first, so you can go for it and have an advantage going into the future turns. Zacian is able to join the field in that Tailwind environment. Not so necessary at this point, because Charizard and the Zacian were both going to outspeed the both Pokemon without that Tailwind regardless. It was quite interesting going for the Max Guard. You could see exactly what the Charizard were going for there. Protect would have kept it safe from something like a Sleep Powder, but not from a Max Geyser. It would have taken huge damage through the Protect if it did go for that. So Max Guard expecting that Max Geyser to come out from the Kyogre, but very wisely not going for the Dynamax just yet for Antonio. And now they can very much go for it this turn if they want to. They should be able to survive the combination of the Behemoth Blade and the Max Airstream, and would be able to respond with a KO into the Charizard with that Max Geyser. Venusaur could have gone for some Sleep Powders for the Charizard and the Zacian here, but switching into your Incineroar to intimidate the Zacian pretty much will guarantee that this Kyogre should make it through this turn if it does opt to go for that Dynamax.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're Antonio now, you have to really work around with the Kyogre here. You need to make sure that it's getting the support from the partner Pokemon that's going to enable it to pick up the big damage and big KOs. And particularly when you're looking down that Charizard, you need to be able to remove it from the fray, as well as the Zacian. Zacian can certainly hit a really heavy hit, and we've seen, particularly as it's speedy naturally anyway, and then with the Tailwind, how sort of dominant it can be at steamrolling through a team and picking up solid KOs. So nice to see this Dynamax Kyogre in play at this point. Zacian is going to go for the Behemoth Blade. And, you know, going down into the Kyogre, it's going to deal, you know, about a quarter of damage, almost a third of damage there at this point. But Kyogre able to take it so well thanks to being in the Dynamax. But a little cheeky surprise here. Max Overgrowth coming, no doubt, of Solar Beam into that opposing Charizard. And actually, it's quite underwhelming damage compared to the Behemoth Blade, despite being super effective.
Yeah, you can see the massive special defense coming out from the Kyogre there. Able to shrug off both of those attacks very comfortably. And this Max Geyser will pick up a KO. It doesn't matter which one is going into. You are going to be targeting down that Charizard, so in the rain, there's no chance it's going to be able to survive that, even with its double HP. And now you've taken care of the Charizard very comfortably. And there was no G-Max Wildfire set. There was a Max Guard into a Max Overgrowth, so there's going to be no residual damage coming out as well. You can just get this recovery with the Grass Terrain that was set very kindly for the Kyogre by that Charizard. So it might even be out of range of the opposing Zacian's Behemoth Blade once again, because it didn't do too much damage, especially with that Intimidate. And now that you switched in the Incineroar, the Dynamax has been used up on one side of the field. You get to fake out either target, so you can put a stop to the Kyogre from being able to KO your Incineroar with any of the water moves. You don't particularly know if the Kyogre is going to be moving first on Antonio's side of the field or Juan's side of the field. If you are confident on Antonio's side of the field that you are outspeeding the opposing Kyogre, you can very safely fake out the Zacian and get the attack off first. But if you are unsure, you can choose either target here, whether the Kyogre to stop the Incineroar's damage. In Zacian, it's going to be really close if it can KO the Kyogre, but if you fake out the Kyogre and Kyogre is able to survive the Behemoth Blade that could come its way, then you are in a very strong position.
That's the thing, it's a bit risky for the Kyogre either way. Zacian actually going to go for the Protect here, not going to try and go for a Behemoth Blade. It might even be a double Protect just to stall out this fake out, but no, Incineroar calls it and goes into the Kyogre here, stopping it from going for a potential Thunder into this Kyogre that's able to go for a Max Geyser in return. So just targeting down onto that Zacian. Through the Protect still does a significant chunk of damage, but obviously just wants to try and remove it to give Kyogre a little bit more longevity here on the field. Fake out has now been burnt by Antonio, so he doesn't have that utility to be able to stop a Pokemon in its tracks. And Kyogre is sitting relatively vulnerable when you consider the moves that we know that Kyogre has the Electric type move. We know that the Behemoth Blade can do a significant chunk, but that little bit of grassy terrain recovery could be critical if Zacian wants to go for the Behemoth Blade.
Yeah, it's going to almost certainly put it out of range of the Behemoth Blade at this point based on the previous damage. That grassy terrain could have been crucial in that regard, but you've also managed to get a crucial amount of chip onto the opposing Zacian as well, even through the Protect. That means it's going to be in range of Behemoth Blade from the Zacian in the back, most likely, presumably in the back for Antonio. If you do get off another Max Geyser with the Kyogre, you will be KOing this Zacian. And the fact that the Venusaur is waiting in the back for Antonio as well means that you probably do want to be targeting down this Zacian. If you take care of the Zacian with Venusaur still available, you should be able to beat the Kyogre, especially with the grassy terrain on the field. That Frenzy Plant is almost certainly going to be picking up a one-hit knockout. And you get to smartly preserve your Incineroar as well. You can get some fake outs and Intimidates down in the future. The Venusaur is not going to mind too much taking any of the water type moves coming out from the Kyogre, because the Zacian, it's a effectively forced to target this Kyogre here. So with that cross terrain recovery and the Intimidate going down into that Kyogre, it is not enough to KO. And it looks like that grassy terrain may have been crucial for that survival, but the Kyogre on one side of the field did move first.
Yeah, that is critical for the Kyogre, being able to be speedy on Juan's side. Kyogre able to survive the Behemoth Blade, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter. It has now been KO'd due to the Kyogre on the opposing side. Venusaur switching in as well for Antonio, so just being able to be in a position to allow Incineroar from the back to come forward, throw another Intimidate down, have that fake out utility again if Antonio wants to bring it in.
Yeah, and now it's going to be an interesting endgame here, because that cross-terrain recovery has been... It was crucial for the Kyogre to survive, but then it had to take the Water Spout as well. That would have allowed Venusaur to take less damage as well, because it did survive and didn't turn into a single target. But also the Zacian on one side of the field is receiving that recovery as well. That might put it out of range of the Behemoth Blade at this point. We did see Antonio's move first, so if the Zacian does join the field, then you are able to get that Behemoth Blade into the opposing Zacian, most likely before the opposing Zacian as well. But you've got to be able to get some damage into this Kyogre as well, because if you target down the Zacian with the Behemoth Blade, Kyogre gets to go for a full HP Water Spout once again, and that would KO the Venusaur and most likely KO the Zacian as well. So it's still incredibly awkward here. The Zacian is going to join the field instead of the Incineroar. Maybe the fact that you've got the Intimidate down on the opposing Zacian, and you could switch in the Incineroar for the Venusaur or the Zacian once again to get another Intimidate. Maybe you do ignore this Zacian somewhat, try and take care of this Kyogre, because if it's allowed to Water Spout once again, that could be disastrous. And the Venusaur is going to be in range most likely of the Behemoth Blade coming out from opposing Zacian as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Incineroar join the field here. Try and take care of the HP of the Kyogre, reduce the damage output of the opposing Zacian so that your own Zacian can take the game.
I always think from the player's perspective, this is an incredible mind game to be in. If you look at Juan, he's got only the 2 Pokemon remaining. So from Antonio's side, those 2 HP bars are all that stands between him and being in the finals at this point. Antonio does still have some switchability. You've got the Incineroar, like you mentioned, you could switch it in, get some Intimidates, get some Fake Outs. It still has the utility to kind of command that board position, but ultimately Antonio needs to get the KOs and the damage rolling on this Zacian and on this Kyogre, and the Intimidates will certainly help to prevent the physical output that the Zacian has against his remaining Pokemon. Zacian on Juan's side is going to go for a Protect as well, just playing a little bit defensively at this point here, as Zacian on Antonio's side goes for the Sacred Sword into the Kyogre. Huge damage, there's over 50% here, as Kyogre connects the Origin Pulse on Juan's side down into both Pokemon on Antonio's. Venusaur able to hang on, Zacian able to hang on.
Oh, but a Sleep Powder was launched off, and it was just into a Protect of the Zacian, so that was an opportunity for a KO on that Kyogre. You could have gone for the Frenzy Plant into the Kyogre to KO that, but Protect there coming out from the Zacian, that was an opportunity to KO the Venusaur. That would have mean that you didn't go to sleep as well, so a little bit of a missed opportunity coming out for Juan there, getting some good damage from Antonio's side of the field onto that Kyogre. That means that Kyogre is going to be in range of another secret sword here, so yeah, it's going to be very close endgame now. The Grass Terrain recovery allows that Zacian to recover even more, probably out of range of the Behemoth Blade now. So yeah, the Venusaur not being able to get the Sleep Powder, able to survive the Origin Pulse from both Pokemon here. It's going to be a very interesting finish. Maybe you protect your Zacian and try and get your Incineroar in so you can get a Fake Out and Sacred Sword. The Venusaur, unspeeding both Pokemon here, going to be in range of any of the attacks that either Pokemon will want to go for. Both Pokemon probably in range of Origin Pulse, even without the rain at this point as well. So the Kyogre is able to get that Origin Pulse off. That could be crucial. It's going to be Protect this time on the Protect of the Zacian on Antonio's side of the field.
Yeah, protecting Zacians all round last turn, and now this turn it's Antonio is going to be protecting itself. Origin Pulse coming out from the opposing Kyogre, going to be able to find its mark down onto the Venusaur, obviously protecting Zacian safe from any damage in this particular turn, but Venusaur will be KO'd. Despite the rain going away, it's still a very powerful move, meaning Antonio will now be forced to bring in the Incineroar from the back, and I really actually like this play that's come out where you've had the Protect on the Zacian, just preserving it to allow it to then be able to attack when you've got Fake Out right next to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll get another Intimidate on the opposing Zacian as well. That'll put it to -1. And with all that Grassy Terrain recovery, be really close if the Zacian on Antonio that field is in range of Behemoth Blade at this point. With -1, it'll be really close. The Zacian on one side of the field is almost certainly out of range of the Behemoth Blade. You get to go for a Fake Out and a Sacred Sword into the Kyogre. That would be most likely KO the Kyogre at this point. You could go for a Fake Out into the Kyogre and a Behemoth Blade into the Zacian, but probably not going to KO at that point, and you'll be able to get the Behemoth Blade off on one side of the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if we just see Incineroar come in, probably burn the turn of the Fake Out by going for the double protect, because if you don't go for the double protect, Fake Out goes into the Zacian and Sacred Sword goes into the Kyogre. That's going to be a KO, and then you win the 2v1. Especially the fact that the Incineroar is at full HP as well. So long as you don't take a water move on your Incineroar at this point, it should be able to take on the Sacred Swords coming out from the opposing Zacian and should be able to win with the Flare Blitz in combination with the Behemoth Blade from the Zacian. So a very, very close endgame here, down to the last two Pokemon for both of these players. But it looks like the advantage may slightly be in Antonio's favor.
Well, Zacian on Juan's side going for that protect first of all, particularly with Fake Out being a pressure on the field, and Kyogre as well. So like you said, Jamie, just got to burn through that Fake Out, stop it from utilizing one of your Pokemon being kind of just frozen in its tracks, allowing the Zacian on Antonio's side to deal out some big damage. There's the Sacred Sword again going into the protect. So that was the play out that Antonio was going for, the Fake Out into the Zacian, and Zacian going for the Kyogre. But now you're in this turn, it's really going to come down to the physical output of these Zacians. The Zacian, like you mentioned, is -1 on Juan's side. Whether a Behemoth Blade is going to be enough at this point to stop Zacian on Antonio's side from dealing with the Kyogre, it's going to be close.
It is going to be close, and that Kyogre went for a double protect. That makes a lot of sense because this Sacred Sword was enough to pick up the KO, so you had to get that double protect with the Kyogre, but it did end up failing that. We'll have to see if this Behemoth Blade is enough to KO the opposing Zacian, because then maybe you can get some critical hits with your fighting type attacks. But it is only -1 at this point, but still strong enough. Of course, Zacian is going to be one of the strongest Pokemon we know. Who cares about Intimidate? It's still going to be strong enough into that Zacian, but probably not into the Incineroar. Flare Blitz will at least two-shot this opposing Zacian. It is not going to knock it out in one shot, so it does need to land one more Flare Blitz, but the Zacian has been intimidated twice now. It should be in range of, out of range of the fighting type attacks.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sacred Sword can do a significant amount to Incineroar, but if you've had your attack stat dropped, then it puts you in a really precarious position at this stage. It is going to go for it, however, connects down onto Incineroar, but Incineroar's able to survive, meaning Incineroar's going to be able to close out this game for Antonio with a Flare Blitz, and Antonio will be your second finalist here at the Bilbao Special Event.
Yeah, very, very good games coming out from both of these players. Incredible play. But Antonio just able to get it at the end. Almost no HP left on that Incineroar, but able to take that game and advance Antonio into the finals of this Bilbao Special Event. So going to be joining Jonas Wiegel in the final.
Oh, what a fantastic set that was, pushing it right through to a Game 3 as well. And I think it was amazing seeing the way that both of our players were able to pivot through their Pokemon, gaining at the beginning of all the games as well those speed opportunities, making sure to pick up the KOs against the really annoying Pokemon that were going to frustrate you towards that end game. But particularly in that Game 3, I think making sure that you're in a position that you could just deal out those damages with the Incineroar and with the Zacian as well, making sure that your opponent didn't have the power in the tank to be able to pick up the KOs against you.
Yeah, it didn't seem so. The Intimidates were very crucial. You saw that Antonio ended up with the effectively neutral, but, you know, +1 with the Intrepid Sword. So at full power, Zacian against the -1 Zacian. So the damage output was reduced enough. The Sacred Sword was still doing a lot of damage to that opposing Incineroar, but just not enough, unfortunately. It seemed like maybe that first turn, the Max Guard on the Charizard, that was a missed opportunity for some extra damage at that point. You could see exactly what was being going for in that Game 3, because the Charizard was so influential in that Game 2. It went for Protect initially in that Game 2, so it makes sense to try and get damage through the Protect with the Max Geyser, even if it all goes on the offensive and gets KO'd. But the Max Guard not going into that Max Geyser, unfortunately, so that could have been an opportunity to just go for Protect once again, stall out of that extra turn and get another turn of your Dynamax and slightly fall behind in the damage output.
Very true. Well, I know you guys will be really excited for us to jump into finals, but we'll see if we can quickly steal Antonio for a quick interview if there's time, and if not, we'll be right back with finals. So don't go anywhere, Pokemon trainers.
Hello and welcome back to the Pokemon 2022 Bilbao Special Event, and I am joined by our second finalist today, Antonio Sánchez. Congratulations for making it to the final. How does it feel to have reached the final at this event?
Thank you. So, yeah, reaching finals in my first special/regional event feels good, but the job is not finished yet. I've been saying the whole week I was winning this event, so there is one last step for that goal, so here we go.
Yeah, one final step, one game, just the final remaining. So, yeah, let's talk quickly about that previous game. We had a very dominant game one. The Venusaur was putting in so much work, it just didn't get attacked and was able to Vine Lash and get so much damage. But then you left it on the bench in that game too. What made you decide to leave it on the bench for that second game?
Yeah, so I was actually expecting an adjustment for my opponent because my lead was kind of weak to, like, Indeedee Venusaur, for example. So I was like, okay, if he goes Indeedee Venusaur, I just want to have Tornado Sensation next to each other and go for Tailwind and Behemoth Blade. But that wasn't the case. So it didn't work out as well. But yeah, in my game plan where he goes Venusaur in DD, my Venusaur didn't feel as good. So that's why I left it in the bench for that
Yeah,
case.
and then you went back to the Venusaur and the Kyogre in that third game. So can you talk us through why you went back to what worked in that game one?
So in my top 8 match, I was facing a similar composition with Whimsicott and Charizard, and my opponent did the same thing where they go Whimsicott Charizard and go for Protect and Tailwind. So my friend Victor pointed out that be careful because he watched the game, so he might repeat the same thing. And as we saw in game 2, he went for Protect Tailwind actually. So it was like, yeah, if I went Venusaur Kyogre, you are going to do the same thing. That's why exactly in game 3, for example, I read that turn. I went for the double up into Whimsicott because I was so confident on Charizard protecting. So yeah, I knew that my line, like Venusaur Kyogre, worked into Charizard Whimsicott, so that's why I went back.
Yeah, it was very good. You didn't even catch a protect. You caught a max guard instead.
Yeah.
So using up a max turn put you in the driving seat, and yeah, able to take that game 3. Very well done, and congratulations for reaching it to the final. We will see if you are able to go that one extra step and take down Jonas Wiegel in that final. So stay tuned. We will be right back soon with the final.